The scream was trapped in my throat, a silent wave of agony that threatened to choke me. My hands trembled, the expensive silk scarf I'd bought in the Dubai souk slipping through my fingers and falling to the polished marble floor. They were gone, vanished, leaving me stranded in a foreign country, a place of shimmering towers and suffocating heat, with nothing but the clothes on my back and the echoing laughter of betrayal ringing in my ears. They thought they had broken me, left me for dead in the desert of their ambition, but they underestimated the quiet strength that had always burned beneath the surface. If you have a sister, a mother, or any woman in your life that you cherish and would defend, subscribe now and become part of our family. The trip to Dubai had been my daughter Emily's idea, a celebration, she'd called it, a chance for us to reconnect after years of distance, a wound she promised to heal. I had been hesitant, of course. The years hadn't been kind. My savings were modest, my spirit weary from the constant struggle of making ends meet after my husband, Emily's father, had left this world unexpectedly. But Emily had insisted, practically begging me. She'd said she wanted to treat me, that she finally had the means to give me the kind of vacation I deserved. And who was I to deny my only child the chance to show her love? So I booked the ticket, packed my bags with a mix of excitement and trepidation, and flew halfway across the world to meet her in Dubai. The first few days were a dream. Emily was attentive, showering me with gifts and experiences. We visited the Burj Khalifa, rode camels in the desert, and dined in opulent restaurants where the food was as extravagant as the decor. I even started to relax, to believe that maybe, just maybe, our fractured relationship could be mended. Then Emily introduced me to Mark. He was charming, wealthy, and undeniably interested in my daughter, showering her with gifts and attention. He was also, I would soon discover, the architect of my despair. Brittany, that's me, remembers the exact moment the facade began to crumble. It was during a lavish dinner cruise on Dubai Creek. The city lights glittered around us, reflecting in the dark water like a million scattered diamonds. Emily excused herself to freshen up, leaving me alone with Mark. He turned to me, his smile a cold mask, and began to speak in a low, menacing voice. He started talking about Emily's future, his future, and how I didn't fit into that picture. Then he started talking about money, Emily's inheritance from my late husband, money that I had responsibly managed for years, money that was now apparently an obstacle to their happiness. The conversation escalated quickly. He implied that if I didn't cooperate, if I didn't simply disappear from their lives, there would be consequences. I was stunned. I tried to reason with him, to appeal to a sense of decency, but his eyes were like ice, devoid of any emotion. When Emily returned, she acted as if nothing had happened, but I saw the knowing look in her eyes, the subtle signal that confirmed my worst fears. She was in on it. They both were. The next morning, I woke up to find my plane ticket gone. My passport was missing from my purse. When I confronted Emily, she didn't even try to deny it. With a chilling calmness, she told me that she and Mark had decided it was best if I stayed in Dubai, that they would take care of me, that I would be comfortable. But I saw the truth in her eyes. They wanted me out of the picture, silenced, forgotten. They wanted the inheritance, and they were willing to abandon their own mother to get it. They left me at the hotel with a few $100s, enough to survive for a few days, but not enough to get home. As I watched their taxi disappear down the palm-lined street, a wave of despair washed over me. I was alone, penniless, and stranded in a foreign country. But beneath the despair, a flicker of something else ignited, a cold, burning rage that would fuel my survival and ultimately become their undoing.
I would not let them win. I would find a way to survive, to expose their treachery, and to reclaim what was rightfully mine. The anger simmered within me, a constant, burning ember that kept me going even when I felt like I had nothing left to give. It was more than anger. It was a fierce, protective love for the woman I used to be and a burning desire to protect my future. One evening, after a particularly grueling shift at the cafe, I returned to my motel room to find it ransacked. My few remaining belongings were scattered across the floor, and the money I had carefully hidden under the mattress was gone. Panic seized me. This wasn't just random theft. This was deliberate. They were trying to break me, to push me over the edge. I sank to my knees, the weight of my situation crushing me. Tears streamed down my face, hot and bitter. I was alone, penniless, and vulnerable. They had taken everything from me, even my hope. But even in that moment of utter despair, a new determination began to form. They wanted me gone, they wanted me silenced. Then I would become a ghost, a shadow, an unseen force that would haunt their every step. I would use their arrogance against them, their belief that they were untouchable. I would bide my time, gather my strength, and when the moment was right, I would strike back with a vengeance they could never have imagined. I was done playing by their rules. It was time to write my own. The weight of that moment threatened to crush me entirely. They had not only stolen my money and my security, but also my sense of self. I was adrift, a ghost in a city that shimmered with wealth and opportunity, but offered me only despair. The image of Emily's face, cold and calculating, burned in my mind. How could the child I had nurtured, the daughter I had sacrificed everything for, betray me so completely? The question echoed in the silence of the ransacked motel room, a constant, agonizing refrain. I considered giving up, simply surrendering to the darkness that threatened to engulf me. What was the point of fighting? I was old, alone, and without resources. They had won. They had broken me. I curled up on the floor, the rough, stained carpet scratching against my skin, and wept. The tears flowed freely, a torrent of grief, anger, and despair. I cried for the life I had lost, for the daughter I had loved, and for the future that had been stolen from me. Hours passed. The sky outside shifted from black to a bruised purple, then to a pale, watery blue. The sounds of the city began to stir, the rumble of traffic, the distant call to prayer, the muffled voices of other lost souls. As the first rays of sunlight crept through the grimy window, something shifted within me. The tears subsided, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I would not let them win. I would not let them break me. I would survive, and I would make them pay. The first step was to disappear. I couldn't stay in that motel, not after what had happened. They would be back, or they would send someone else. I needed to find a place where I could be invisible, a place where they would never think to look for me. I gathered my few remaining belongings, a worn-out dress, a toothbrush, and a small tarnished silver locket that had belonged to my grandmother. It was the only thing of real sentimental value that I had left. I tucked it inside my dress, a small talisman of hope and resilience. Then I slipped out of the motel room and into the anonymity of the city. I spent the next few days drifting from place to place, sleeping in parks, on beaches, anywhere I could find a moment's respite from the relentless heat and the gnawing hunger. I scavenged for food in dumpsters, sharing scraps with stray cats and dogs. I learned to blend in, to become a shadow, to move through the city unnoticed. I observed the people around me, the street vendors, the construction workers, the tourists, the beggars. I studied their habits, their routines, their vulnerabilities, and I began to formulate a plan. My anger was a living thing now, a constant companion that whispered in my ear, urging me to action. But I knew that I couldn't act rashly. I needed information, I needed resources, and I needed a strategy. I started by seeking out the places where the city's underbelly was exposed, the back alleys, the hidden cafes, the crowded markets where secrets were bought and sold. I listened to conversations, piecing together fragments of information, searching for any clue that might lead me to Emily and Mark. It was a slow, painstaking process, but I was patient. I had nothing but time. One evening, while I was washing dishes at a small restaurant, I overheard a conversation between two men, talking about a wealthy businessman who had recently been cheated out of a large sum of money. They mentioned a name that sounded vaguely familiar. Mark. I strained to listen, my heart pounding in my chest. They were discussing a property deal that had gone sour, a deal that involved a luxury apartment complex on the outskirts of the city. The men seemed to think that Mark had been the victim of a scam, but something in their tone made me suspicious. I filed the information away, a small piece of the puzzle falling into place. As the days turned into weeks, I continued to gather information, slowly building a picture of Emily and Mark's new life. I discovered that they had indeed purchased a luxury apartment, that they were frequenting expensive restaurants and nightclubs, and that they were living the high life on my stolen inheritance. The knowledge fueled my anger, but it also sharpened my focus. I knew that I couldn't confront them directly. They were too powerful, too well connected. I needed to find a way to expose their treachery, to reveal their true nature to the world. I needed evidence, irrefutable proof of their crimes.
And then I remembered something that Emily had once told me, a secret that she had shared in a moment of drunken vulnerability. She had mentioned that Mark kept a detailed record of all his business dealings, including his illegal activities, on a secure laptop. The laptop was his most prized possession, his Achilles heel. If I could get my hands on that laptop, I would have everything I needed to bring them down. The plan began to take shape in my mind, a risky, audacious plan that would require all my cunning and resourcefulness. But I was ready. I had nothing left to lose. The woman they had left for dead was gone. In her place stood a new woman, a woman forged in the fires of betrayal, a woman with a single-minded purpose, to seek revenge. The hunt had begun. The decision to go after the laptop was a gamble, a high-stakes play that could either liberate me or crush me completely. I knew I couldn't do it alone. I needed someone with skills I didn't possess, someone who could navigate the complexities of modern technology and security systems. I remembered a young man named Omar who worked at the internet cafe near the restaurant. He was quiet and unassuming, but I had noticed his quick fingers and his intense focus whenever he was working on a computer. He seemed to possess a natural affinity for technology, a sense that he understood the digital world in a way that most people didn't. I approached him cautiously, offering him a proposition that I knew was both dangerous and potentially lucrative. I told him that I needed his help to access a secure computer, that I suspected it contained evidence of illegal activity, and that I was willing to pay him a substantial sum if he could retrieve the information for me. I didn't tell him the whole truth, of course. I couldn't risk him betraying me, but I gave him enough details to pique his interest and to convince him that the potential reward was worth the risk. To my relief, he agreed. His eyes gleamed with a mixture of excitement and apprehension as he listened to my plan. He asked a few probing questions, testing my knowledge and my resolve, but ultimately he seemed convinced that I was serious. Over the next few days, Omar and I worked tirelessly, meticulously planning every detail of the operation. He explained the intricacies of hacking into a secure network, the different methods of bypassing firewalls and encryption, and the importance of covering our tracks. I learned about IP addresses, phishing scams, and virtual private networks, a whole new language that seemed foreign and intimidating at first, but gradually became more familiar. We spent hours researching Mark's security systems, studying the layout of his apartment complex, and identifying potential vulnerabilities. Omar discovered that the building had a state-of-the-art surveillance system, with cameras positioned at every entrance and exit.
He also learned that Mark had hired a private security firm to patrol the grounds, making it even more difficult to gain access undetected. We needed a way to disable the cameras and to evade the security guards, a task that seemed almost impossible. But Omar was undeterred. He was confident that he could find a way to outsmart the system, to exploit its weaknesses, and to create a window of opportunity for us to slip through unnoticed. He suggested using an electromagnetic pulse device to temporarily disable the cameras. It was risky, but it was the most promising option we had. Obtaining one was another story. The next hurdle was getting inside the apartment. Omar discovered that Mark had installed a sophisticated alarm system with motion detectors and pressure sensors. We needed a way to bypass the alarm without triggering it, a task that required both technical expertise and nerves of steel. Omar devised a plan to use a combination of infrared sensors and a specialized code to disarm the system. He would need to be inside the apartment to implement the plan, which meant that I would have to find a way to distract Mark and Emily long enough for Omar to do his work. I decided to use their greed against them. I sent Emily an anonymous message, hinting that I knew about a hidden stash of cash that Mark had been keeping from her. I knew that their relationship was built on lies and deceit, and that the prospect of finding a secret fortune would be too tempting for her to resist. I suggested that she meet me at a secluded location, a place where we could talk without being overheard. I didn't expect her to come alone, but I was prepared for that. I had a plan for dealing with Mark, a plan that involved a carefully orchestrated distraction and a well-placed phone call to the authorities. The meeting place was an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, a desolate and forgotten place where the shadows stretched long and the air hung heavy with the scent of decay. I arrived early, carefully scouting the area, ensuring that there were no hidden surprises. I found a spot behind a stack of crates, a place where I could observe the entrance without being seen. I waited, my heart pounding in my chest, my senses on high alert. The minutes ticked by slowly, each one feeling like an eternity. Finally, I saw their car approaching, its headlights cutting through the darkness. Emily emerged first, her face etched with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Mark followed close behind, his eyes scanning the surroundings, his hand resting on the handle of a concealed weapon. They were clearly expecting trouble. As they approached my hiding place, I stepped out from behind the crates, my face hidden in the shadows. Emily gasped, her eyes widening in surprise. Mark reached for his weapon, his face contorted in anger. "What do you want?" he snarled, his voice dripping with menace. I stepped forward, into the light, my eyes fixed on Emily.
"I want what's rightfully mine," I said, my voice cold and steady. "And I'm not leaving until I get it." The game had begun. While I kept them occupied, Omar worked his magic, disabling the cameras and infiltrating the apartment. The plan was in motion. The final step was extracting the data from the laptop. Omar had managed to bypass the security system and gain access to the computer, but he needed time to copy the files onto a portable hard drive. The problem was, the laptop was heavily encrypted, and breaking the encryption would take time we didn't have. Omar came up with a solution. He would create a mirror image of the hard drive, a complete copy of all the data, including the encrypted files. He could then take the mirror image back to his lab and work on breaking the encryption at his leisure. It was a risky move, as it would leave a trace of our activity on the computer, but it was the only way to get the data we needed in the limited time we had. As Omar was copying the files, he stumbled upon something unexpected, a hidden folder containing surveillance footage of me, recorded without my knowledge. The footage showed me in my motel room, in the cafe, even sleeping on the beach. They had been watching me, tracking my every move, waiting for me to make a mistake. The discovery sent a chill down my spine. It was a stark reminder of the danger I was in, of the lengths they were willing to go to silence me. But it also fueled my resolve. I would not be intimidated. I would not be silenced. I would use their own tactics against them. The end was near. The discovery of the surveillance footage was a turning point. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about my life, my safety, my very existence. They hadn't just stolen from me. They had hunted me, stalked me, treated me like prey. The anger that had been simmering inside me reached a boiling point. I wanted them to suffer, to feel the same fear and helplessness that I had felt, to understand the true cost of their betrayal. I looked at Omar, his face pale with shock, and I knew that he understood. He had seen the darkness in their eyes, the ruthlessness in their actions. He was no longer just helping me get my money back. He was helping me survive. "We need to finish this," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "We need to expose them, to make sure they can never hurt anyone again." Omar nodded, his eyes filled with determination. "I'm with you," he said. "Let's get this done." With renewed urgency, Omar finished copying the data onto the portable hard drive.
He carefully disconnected the device, erased all traces of our activity from the computer's memory, and re-enabled the security system. We slipped out of the apartment as silently as we had entered, leaving no trace of our presence behind. As we drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I glanced in the rearview mirror, but I saw nothing but empty streets and darkened buildings.
Still, the unease lingered, a cold knot in the pit of my stomach. I knew that we were running out of time. Back at Omar's makeshift lab, a cramped room filled with computers and wires, we began the painstaking process of analyzing the data. The encrypted files were a challenge, but Omar was confident that he could crack them. He worked tirelessly, running complex algorithms and using specialized software to break through the layers of security. Hours turned into days, and the tension in the room grew thicker with each passing moment. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Omar cracked the encryption. The files were now accessible, revealing a treasure trove of incriminating evidence. There were documents detailing Mark's illegal business dealings, emails outlining his fraudulent schemes, and even recordings of his conversations with Emily plotting their next move. The evidence was overwhelming, irrefutable, and more than enough to destroy them both. But the surveillance footage was the most damning of all. It showed their obsession with me, their paranoia, their willingness to do anything to protect their ill-gotten gains. As I watched the footage, I felt a surge of vindication. They thought they were so clever, so untouchable, but they had underestimated me. They had made a fatal mistake, and now they were going to pay the price. "It's time," I said to Omar, my voice filled with grim satisfaction. "It's time to unleash hell." The trap was set. I used one of Mark's old email accounts and sent a message to a local news station outlining every crime they had committed and that I possessed the evidence. I told them where to find the information and that I would be in contact. I included a few sample documents and snippets of audio to prove I was telling the truth. The news station would be all over it, but I knew I needed to keep Mark and Emily busy long enough. I crafted another anonymous message, this time addressed to Mark, hinting that I had discovered his affair with a younger woman and that I was planning to expose him to Emily. I knew that his ego and his fear of losing his wealth would be enough to lure him into my trap. I arranged a meeting at the old warehouse where we had our initial meeting, the same desolate place where the shadows stretched long and the air hung heavy with the scent of decay. I knew he would come armed and ready for a fight, but I was prepared for him. I had a few tricks up my sleeve.
As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the city, I made my way to the warehouse. I dressed in dark clothing, blending into the shadows, becoming one with the darkness. I knew that Mark would be on edge, suspicious, and ready to strike, but I was counting on that. I wanted him to be desperate, to be driven by fear and paranoia. I wanted him to make a mistake. I arrived at the warehouse early, carefully scouting the area, ensuring that there were no hidden surprises. I found a spot behind a stack of crates, a place where I could observe the entrance without being seen. I waited, my heart pounding in my chest, my senses on high alert. The minutes ticked by slowly, each one feeling like an eternity. Finally, I saw his car approaching, its headlights cutting through the darkness. He emerged first, his face contorted with rage. He was alone. That was part of the plan. He was expecting a confrontation with a scorned lover. He wasn't expecting me. As he approached my hiding place, I stepped out from behind the crates, my face hidden in the shadows. He stopped dead in his tracks, his eyes widening in disbelief. "You," he snarled, his voice dripping with venom. "I should have known." I stepped forward, into the light, my eyes fixed on him. "Hello, Mark," I said, my voice cold and steady. "It's time to pay for your sins." Before he could react, before he could even reach for his weapon, the warehouse doors slammed shut. He spun around, trying to find an escape, but it was too late. He was trapped, and I had the key. The game was over. The warehouse plunged into darkness, the only light source now a single spotlight trained on Mark. Panic flashed across his face as he realized the extent of his predicament. From the shadows, my voice echoed, amplified by a hidden speaker system. "Remember all those times you thought you were in control, Mark? All those moments you looked down on everyone else? It all ends here."
a screen flickered to life, displaying the surveillance footage Omar had discovered. Mark, leering at the camera, whispering about his plans to take care of me. The next video showed Emily, her face twisted with greed, discussing how to hide the stolen money. Mark lunged toward the screen, but a high-voltage pulse surged through the metal walls, sending him staggering back, clutching his chest. Not enough to really hurt him, just enough to keep him in place. He roared in frustration, a sound that quickly turned to a whimper as more footage appeared. Documents detailing his shady deals, emails exposing his lies, recordings of his conversations with Emily. The walls were closing in. Then the big one. Footage of Mark with another woman, whispering sweet nothings and promising her the world. I could almost hear Emily's scream of betrayal, even though she wasn't there.
The doors burst open, and the news crew flooded in, cameras flashing, microphones thrust in Mark's face. He tried to speak, to deny everything, but his voice was drowned out by the reporters' questions. They had received my anonymous tip, and they had arrived just in time to witness his downfall. As they swarmed around him, I slipped away unnoticed, melting back into the shadows. My part was done. The next morning, the news was everywhere. Mark's empire crumbled overnight. His business partners abandoned him, his investors pulled out, and his reputation was ruined beyond repair. Emily, fueled by rage and betrayal, turned against him, providing the authorities with even more evidence of his wrongdoings. He tried to flee the country, but he was apprehended at the airport, his face plastered across every news channel. He went from a powerful, untouchable figure to a disgraced criminal, facing a long prison sentence. Annalie was implicated as well, facing charges for her involvement in his schemes. Their carefully constructed world of lies and deceit had collapsed, leaving them with nothing but the wreckage of their shattered lives. They lost everything. I just smiled. I watched it all unfold from a distance, a sense of quiet satisfaction washing over me. The money I lost was a small price to pay for the justice I had obtained. I knew that I could never truly erase the pain and the trauma they had inflicted upon me, but I had found a way to reclaim my power, to take back control of my life. I packed my bags, ready to leave town. As I stood on the beach, watching the waves crash against the shore, I reflected on everything that had happened: the betrayal, the anger, the planning, the execution. It had been a long and arduous journey, one that had tested me to my limits, but I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever before. It was over. I was free. Revenge isn't sweet. It's necessary. It's a survival mechanism when the world stacks against you. It is a way to show that actions have consequences. It's about protecting yourself and those who can't protect themselves. It's about drawing a line in the sand and saying, enough. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.